Record. All right, guys. So this is the real deal. We're live now. We're going to record here and jump right in. And this is our 5th town hall. It's about championship season and in particular, giving some advice about what championship season is, and then just a very high level, broad view about sleep and nutrition and hydration. And I'll get into it in a minute, but just full disclosure, a little scared to talk about this topic. Just yeah, people feel strongly when it comes to nutrition and things like that. So definitely a little bit of a nerve-wracking topic for me, but we'll dive into it anyway. And I kept it pretty tame, pretty high level view, and we can go from there. So let's jump right into our thing here. Let's see if I can get this down to just, how do I get it on? Oh, that's better. Okay, here we go. So a quick overview of what we're going to do. We're going to talk about when championship season happens and what it is, who participates in championship season. We'll hit a brief rundown on prelim and final meets. Then we'll talk about that's when we'll finish with the nutrition and hydration and sleep and all the things you can do. Plus something that'll be a little bit kind of a fun way to end is I'm going to actually walk all of you through a visualization exercise that I often do with my super pup swimmers. Those who have done it with me before think it's typically a pretty fun exercise. They tend to like it and sometimes laugh about it a little bit because they have a good time. So that's how we will wrap it up tonight. Let's jump in now. And full disclosure here, I am not a Game of Thrones fan, but anytime I talk about winter, I've just seen not that I dislike it, I just haven't watched it, but I hear this a lot. This winter is coming, so I had to throw it on here. As soon as I talk about winter, I had to throw this on here. But when you think about championship season in swimming, typically think about the coldest time of year when people would not want to swim. That's probably your championship season right there in swimming. And that's definitely true for us. So you got a picture of Michael Phelps here for championship season. This is after he has participated in several Olympics and won all kinds of medals, basically every medal you can win out there, world records and all that. And so I figured he was a pretty good representation of championship season. You got to show the ultimate champ when you're talking about championship season. So what it is it's typically December through March. And it's not really like a real, like if you asked a coach on another club, what is championship season, they might have a different answer than what I have. But specifically, this is kind of what I boiled it down to, is the December through March. And in particular, it's the championship season because this is when the biggest meets are. It's when the season plans that the coaches have written, it's when those season plans come to a head and come to a peak. It's when individuals and teams are hitting the championship phase of their season. The meets often switch from these big invitationals to more like prelim and final meets. And then particularly as swimmers get older, probably dogs and up, maybe a tiny bit in super pups, but mainly dogs and up, it's where swimmers will do the bulk of their best time swims throughout the year for that reason. You'll get into the taper portion of the season, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but basically it's just where swimmers typically feel their best, and maybe they'll throw on a tech suit as well if they're a little bit of an older swimmer when we get to championship season. So what is it and which meets? So it's pretty much, like I said, December through March, and it kind of kicks off right there the very first weekend of December. So we host the Classic City Quad meet every year, which is not actually an official championship meet. It's sort of a second tier championship meet for those that are 15 and over that aren't going to either senior state or senior section, or junior nationals, because junior nationals happens right that time of year as well. So we host Dynamo, Swim Atlanta, Macon, Augusta, and they bring all their kids, the whole team, not just 15 and overs, but the whole team. But if they are 15 and over in that meet, they probably don't have state times or junior national times. And so because there is no championship meet for like 14 and unders in the fall semester, we basically treat that as our big end of the semester meet when we want them all kind of like at least halfway through the year sort of hitting a little mini peak, not their final peak, but sort of a peak. Then in mid-January, so a lot of our ABSC kids, we're a USA Swimming Club team, of course, but a lot of our ABSC kids will also swim for their school teams, right? They'll swim for their high school teams. And so you've got, actually this past weekend at Ramsey was the high school Athens Oconee area meet, which is basically like a county meet, but our county's not big, so we do the surrounding counties as well. It's like the Clark and Oconee schools, basically. Actually, not really surrounding, just Clark and Oconee. So that was this past weekend. I know, like, I think Jefferson had their version of that meet in Commerce, and East Jackson, like, I think they had their version of that meet. They call it like the North Georgia Championship, but it's basically like the big shebang before state. And then there's the high school state meet, which happens at the end of January / early February. And again, most of our ABSC kids, like freshmen in high school through seniors in high school, also swim for their school team, right? Because if you swim ABSC, you're taking swimming decently seriously. So when you show up on your high school team, you're going to be fast. You're going to be scoring points. You're probably going to be doing well at the area meet and potentially going to the high school state meet. The high school state meet qualifying times are actually a little bit easier than the club swimming senior state times as well. So a lot of ABSC kids will do high school state and do really well at that meet. So then once you get into February, that's when we hit, I think this year it's the 17th through 19th. It's the 14 and under state championships. So that's mainly going to be like super pups and dogs going to that meet. You might have the occasional 14-year-old senior one go into that meet. You might have the occasional pup who qualifies for that meet. Typically going to be super pups and dogs going there to 14 and under state. And I should have included the JO champions as well, which is sort of like the second tier state meet that happens that weekend. And that's qualification only. So you only go to that meet if you hit the qualifying standards. It's not like a whole team doesn't go like a basketball tournament. It's like certain swimmers from ABSC will qualify for that meet. Then there's senior sectionals in early March that are some of our senior swimmers who qualify will go to. And there's also an age group sectionals, a 14 and under sectionals, but ABSC does not participate in that meet, sort of for philosophical reasons. We don't really see the value in sending our 14 and unders to a big like regional competition. It feels like a little bit much to ask from a 14 and under, and we're trying to develop kids who are really good when they're 17 and 18, not just good when they're 14, right? So, you might have to miss out on an age group sectional meet if that's the case. We're more worried about your long-term development than we are you go into that sectional meet is really what it comes down to. And so then the big shebang on our championship season is divisionals meet at the end of March. And there are no qualifying times for divisionals. Every kid on the team can participate if they want to. They can do 1 day, they can do 2 days, they can do the Friday night session if they're in super pups and up. So that's the team versus team competition. And for us, we're in the Northeast division of Northeast Georgia, of course. So we race like Gwinnett Aquatics, Lanier Aquatics up in Gainesville, Aiken, Augusta, several of those, teams like that, a couple of the other smaller local teams around here. And that's the Northeast Georgia champions. We're the defending divisionals champions. 2 years ago, we did not win it, but we've won it more often than not the last few years, and hopefully we can do that again, because that's the meet we really build our whole season plan around for the majority of the team is divisionals. And we go really hard on the team spirit. We'll do like a dress up theme, and there's prelims and finals as well. So it's a pretty big, important meet for our club every year. And we host it. It's at Ramsey. So that is also an added bonus, or at least most years it's at Ramsey. So who participates? I'll breeze through this because I went over it a little bit, but Gups and Pups, basically, because 10 and under, 12 and under don't really have championship season the same way, you're basically focusing on Classic City Quad and divisionals as your two big championships. Maybe a 10 and under pup will qualify for state, not super likely. We have like 3 or 4 this year. Super Pups and Dogs, you've got the quad meet, then there's 14 and under state and divisionals. When you get to senior 2 and senior flex, you're probably focusing on Classic City Quad, high school area meet that I just talked about, and high school state. Maybe senior state. We did have some senior 2s qualify for senior state this year, and divisionals. And then senior 1 is all of the above, plus those who qualify for sectionals and junior nationals. So by the time you're a senior 1, it can be a lot. And for some of the senior 1 kids who have qualified for all of it, they kind of have to pick and choose a little bit, because otherwise you're going to be doing meets every single weekend, and that can fill up. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure, off the top of my head, like Simon Casey, for example, in senior 1, he'll probably be going to senior sectionals in early March, and that's where he'll swim his good events. And so then he'll swim his off events at divisionals. So they can kind of do it that way as well. So prelim final meet, for those who have never attended, most of our meets throughout the year are just like dual, like the red and black is like a like a sort of a pseudo dual meet. We do mostly invitational meets, invite meets, where we'll bring several clubs in and just do one session per day. They take 3 or 4 hours. We run 2 pools. It's a pretty big meet, but you can knock out 3 or 4 swims in a day there. And it doesn't take all day, every day, all weekend, right? You can be in and out in half a day instead of all day, right? So that's kind of why we do that. Prelim final meets are for 11 and up only. So divisionals, for example, is a prelim final meet. The 10 and unders still just do one session in the afternoon between prelims and finals. The 11 and ups will swim prelims in the morning. At divisionals, I believe it's the top 16 in each age group in each event come back for finals at night. And so then when you come back at finals, that's how you determine final placing. And finals at divisionals is really fun. We usually get a lot of really fast swims. It's really team spirited. Everybody's cheering for each other and really excited, really into it. It can be a lot of fun. But yeah, the big thing about prelim finals is you swim once in the morning, everyone swims, and then the top 16 come back for finals at night. So let's get into the nitty gritty of talking about preparing for championship season. From the coaching perspective, here's what I'm doing. If you attended our Anatomy of a Swim Practice Zoom earlier this year, a week or two ago, a month or two ago, I should say, I talked about utilization training versus capacity training, which is basically big words for utilization is like specific skills. Capacity is building your overall aerobic base and endurance. So an example, utilization training, we would be doing broken 100 freeze where you dive in off the blocks. And so you're focusing on your dive. Then you do a flip turn and you're focusing on your flip turn. Then maybe you do another flip turn before coming back and racing your finish. So you're like breaking it into little pieces, working on specific parts of the race. That's utilization training. Anything that directly helps certain events get better. Capacity training is like 12 100s freestyle, hold your best pace for all 12. That's capacity training, right? That's building your aerobic base and just making you a better all around higher endurance athlete. So when we get to championship season, we do less of those big capacity sets, those really long, intense sets, and we do more utilization, more broken down, smaller, working on starts, turns, and finishes, more sprinting. We also do more quality work, which quality is swimming jargon for basically for race pace. So instead of doing 8 100s where you're going long and smooth, maybe you're doing 8 25s and you're taking a minute rest in between or 2 minutes rest in between, and your goal is to hit peak speed. I'll even do a set sometimes with super pups where I have them do some 25s at 500 pace, then they'll do it at 200 pace, then they'll do it at 100 pace, then they'll do it at 50 pace. And then they'll do a couple 25s what I call over pace, where I tell them to swim at an unsustainable speed that they can only do for like half a lap. And that's always really fun and like a pretty cool thing for speed work. So we'll get into that as we hit the end of the season here. And as I mentioned before, the older swimmers will do what we call tapering. And so basically what that means is it's kind of the first two combined: more utilization, more quality work, and just much shorter, less intense practices. So in the middle of December, for example, or November, the dogs group, for example, might be doing a 5,500 yard practice. Well, the week before divisionals, they're not going to do a 5,500 yard practice. They're going to do a 3,000 yard practice that has a lot more sprinting and a lot more rest. And the goal is to not be exhausted at the end of practice. So the practice gets a lot shorter, a lot more quality work. And if you ask any swimmer who's an experienced swimmer, dogs and up, do you like tapering? They will probably tell you yes. That is most swimmers' favorite part of the season, is when they get to actually hit the taper point of the season plan, because they're not just getting crushed in there in the middle of the practices. They can kind of like, enjoy it a little bit more and take the foot off the gas a little bit. From the swimmer perspective, when we get to championship season, we're telling them focus on your diet more than ever. As a swimmer, you should be doing that all along, but specifically at championship season, go over your goals, see where you're at, see what times you've made, see how far away you are from your final goals, and then mentally prepare to hit those goals. Do some visualization, which I'm going to walk through with you guys at the end here, which will be kind of fun. Then there's going to be an added focus as well on both hydration and on sleep as well. So those are going to be my talking points as a coach, is going to be tell them, be careful what you eat, be really intentional about what you eat. Swimmers who really want to take it seriously, man, keep a food journal, write down what you're eating each day. And then you can start doing that like a month out of your big meet. Keep a food journal, keep track of what you're doing each day. then you'll have a really good idea of like, okay, is this fueling me or is this not? But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I gotta calm down. I'm getting excited. So let's start with part one here, preparing for the big meet, and let's talk about sleep. So I stole this screenshot from Twitter. This is from Indomitian Sue, who is a NFL defensive lineman. I think most recently he played for Tampa Bay, if I'm not mistaken. He's kind of a veteran who's bounced around to a lot of different teams. He played for the Lions for a long time. But he had this tweet not long ago, back on December 10th, and I've saved it for this Zoom because I thought it was pretty cool. He said, "I've had a night before the game ritual that I've kept a secret for over a decade. I'm convinced it's what's helped me compete at an elite level my entire career. Sharing it here for the first time." Then he sends a follow-up tweet. "Go to bed early and get a good night's sleep." That is his secret ritual that has helped him compete at a high level through his NFL career. That's like a decade long now. And all joking aside, he had several, that was a whole thread. He had several, follow-ups about that. He was serious, like, get to sleep the night before a big game. I think one of his later tweets was like, the night before a big game, I'm in bed by 8:30 p.m. And that's a professional athlete talking. So I'm going to take his advice. I think that's probably pretty good advice right there. So I'm going to share this PowerPoint after the fact, and I've linked some of the articles that I've used so that you guys can go back and take a look and read it, because you're going to be able to go in a lot more depth than I'm going to be able to do on this Zoom here, because I just have, limited time. But some of the added just quick benefits of focusing on improving your sleep in general is you're going to have less injuries. There's actually been studies done, and the one article I have linked here says athletes who sleep 8 hours or more are 1.7 times less likely to have a sports-related injury. So that's helpful. Getting a good night's sleep can help keep you healthy in and out of the pool. And of course, as we know, sleep is used for mental and physical recovery and growth. So really the harder, sleep's all these things, sleep, nutrition, hydration, they're important year round, right? Like if you're in the middle of December, like I talked about earlier, and you're doing a really intense long workout, if you get a good night's sleep, it's going to help you recover for the next day. Well, big meet season, that's definitely true, especially like divisionals or state where you're doing prelims and finals. And you might have, like at state, talk about our fastest state swimmers, maybe a 14-year-old on our, in the dogs group who is a state finalist. That kid's going to be doing 3 individual events on Friday morning, Saturday morning, and Sunday morning. So that's 9 swims right there, plus anything they make finals for, plus relays. That's a lot of swims over the course of a weekend, right? If they're not getting a good night's sleep, that's going to totally derail their performance at the meet. Like there's no way to hold up over the course of that state weekend if you're not getting a good night of sleep. And so this is another article I've linked, but at big meets in general, swimmers who sleep enough, so enough being 8 hours or more, are less likely to be fatigued and stressed at the meet, are more likely to perform well at finals, and are likely to have faster reaction times and hit their top end speed faster. Think about it. This is a sport where you win and lose by 1/100th of a second, right? If you don't have a fastest reaction time, that can cost you. That can be the difference between winning or second place. That can be the difference between getting the state cut or not getting the state cut. That can be the difference between making finals or not making finals. That's a huge deal right there. So you've got to get that sleep. And as I mentioned, swimmers should always sleep well, but specifically during championship season. So just a general rule of thumb, there are a couple of them that you can follow here. Try to get at least 8 hours of sleep. Go to bed early enough that you can do that, especially if you got morning practice the next day. This is a big one for me, but try not to let your athlete have their phone in their bedroom. If they can sleep without having a phone in their room, that is a huge deal. That is really helpful. And specifically during taper time and during championship meet season, take naps. Like when I was a swimmer myself, I used to swim prelims in the morning. If I was fortunate enough to make finals that night, I would go home and sleep between prelims and finals, and then come back and swim my 200 fly at finals that I inevitably qualified for every time. Was the 200 fly and nothing else in finals. So take those naps. But this link here below is basically saying that the Journal of the American Medical Association found that children ages 16 to 18 had an 88% higher risk of not sleeping enough when devices were in their bedroom, and a 53% higher risk of getting a bad night's sleep. And that's when devices were in the bedroom only 3 nights a week. So even if your kid just has their phone in the room a couple nights a week, it's still probably affecting their sleep. I don't think I have to tell you parents that. You probably have realized that already with the prevalence of TikTok and all the things. So Next part, let's jump into talking about nutrition. As I mentioned before, I'm pretty terrified to talk about nutrition because I am not particularly qualified to talk about nutrition. I'm not a dietitian, and everybody's got opinions about it. And what works for some does not work for others. Totally fine. But if we're going to take some very basic steps here for our athletes, we'll probably be doing better than just ignoring it altogether. I don't think that's the right solution either, just ignoring it altogether. So some general rules of thumb that work for me just as a human in life, but will definitely work for your athletes as well. And when I was a swimmer, if it's super sugary, fatty, or caffeinated, you should probably avoid it. I mean, in general, but especially around big meet weekend, right? The days leading up to the big meet, a week before and during the meet, you don't want to be going to like Five Guys and getting the burgers and fries and drinking a big milkshake and, you know, drinking coffee all day. Or I had this guy I used to swim with that used to pound 5-hour energies in the middle of a swim meet. Would highly recommend not doing that because he would never make it to the end of the meet. He would swim like one event and go home because he felt terrible, right? So you want to be careful with all that. And if it gives you indigestion, you should probably avoid it. So some of you have heard of Fitter and Faster. It's a swim camp. They do like a nationwide tour all around the country doing swim camps. And so on their website, they had what I thought was a pretty helpful article about nutrition. So I've linked it here and I'm just going to go over it. So they break it down into what you should eat before a meet, what you should eat during a meet, and what you should eat, what your swimmer should eat after a meet. So before a meet, an ideal meal includes mostly starchy carbs like bread, rice, pasta, potatoes. You guys have probably heard about eating carbs like the night before a swim meet. Also carb-rich fruits and veggies. I would actually probably push you to the veggies more than the starchy breads and such, just personally. That works better for me. Servings of lean protein, chicken, turkey, eggs, beans. I think you could get some, there's no red meat on there, but I think you could get some red meat on there too, as long as it's not just like crazy high fat and it's not huge content of it. You know, you don't need to be eating like a massive ribeye probably, but a little bit of red meat's not going to hurt you. Fluids, obviously drink lots of water and chill out on the caffeine a little bit. This is salty foods. I was a little bit questionable about that. I mean, everything in moderation, right? You don't want to be pounding salty food. That's probably for the best if you avoid that. But some salty food obviously is going to help. Things to avoid. I thought this was really helpful. Avoid before the competition. Don't eat a bunch of food your swimmers never had before. Like if you normally eat one way, they probably shouldn't completely change their entire diet and eat random foods they've never eaten because you don't know what that's going to do to their stomach and their system. I actually used to be guilty of that as a swimmer. I would try to completely change my diet like meet weekend. And then I'd be like, why do I feel so bad? Probably because I'm eating stuff I don't normally, my body doesn't know how to handle the things that I'm trying to eat, Avoid heavy fatty things like cream-based sauces and soups. Chill out on the Chick-fil-A sauce and all that kind of stuff. High fat meats you want to avoid, fried foods, spicy foods, like I said, the indigestion. The biggest problem, and high sugar, because sugar will spike you and then crash you. And yes, I am the guy that said if you want a 10 and under to swim fast, give them a pixie stick. But in all joking, be careful with the sugar. When I was swimming, the fried food and the spicy food and the high fat food if I ate that at a meet, it would really mess with my stomach because you're so stressed out already. You got your adrenaline going, you got your cortisol pumping, and you're like trying as hard as you possibly can and getting your heart rate up and getting so tired. If you got that fatty food sitting on your stomach, that's not going to feel great for you. One term people use a lot is carbo load. Okay, the night before a big meet, we're going to carbo load. We're going to load up on carbs. My answer to that is, I see where you're coming from. There is value to eating carbs. You probably don't want to load up on anything. If you're loading your stomach up massively the night before a swim meet, it's not going to benefit that swimmer the next morning to have a full belly full of just tons of pasta. Probably need to go a little easy, like everything in moderation, like I said earlier. Be careful with the carb loading is all I'll say. I'm not saying don't eat carbs. I'm just saying be careful with the loading aspect of carb load. During a meet. So right before a swimmer races, like less than an hour before they race, the key is small portions. You don't want a lot of food sitting on their stomach. If there's a lot of food sitting on their stomach, that's going to go poorly. So small portions right before they swim of healthy but familiar foods. Now, if your child only ever eats Sour Patch Kids, not that familiar, right? Like they've got to have at least some normal food. but small portions of familiar foods. And it's got some examples like drink some water, maybe a Gatorade Zero or something, some apple slices, some banana, some berries, a bagel, something just. And bagels can be a little heavy on your stomach, but maybe a thin sliced bagel would be good there. More than an hour before the swim, focus on hydrating, get lots of fluid. Larger portions are fine. Again, still familiar foods. You can eat things that are a little heartier if it's more than an hour before they swim, like peanut butter crackers, things like that. And sometimes these meets, like let's say a kid wants to swim the mile on Sunday of divisionals, and that's the last event at the very end. Maybe they swim their first 2 events and then they've got a 2-hour break before they swim the mile. I'd recommend going and getting a decent sized snack in there before they hit that mile during that 2-hour break. After a meet, you want to think protein and carbs, lighter protein, lighter carbs, of course. The word they use here is quality. So peanut butter, nuts, string cheese, 2 eggs, chocolate milk. I've heard chocolate milk is a good recovery drink for swimmers, and I enjoyed that as a swimmer. So there you go. On the carb side, some English muffins, some instant oatmeal, raisins, bananas, things like that. So that's all good recovery after a meet. And then obviously go to dinner as well. Don't just only eat snacks. Go get a nice dinner as well once you're done swimming for the day. Hydration. I'm running a little low on time, so I'm going to breeze through this a little bit. Basically, drink lots of water. A good rule of thumb at the swim meet is half a bottle of water or sports drink after every race. I thought this quote was good, so I pulled this out for you guys. Dehydration of just 3 to 4% of your body weight can reduce muscle strength by about 2%. So if you're losing power in the pool, check your hydration, right? So again, in a sport where we win and lose by 1/100th of a second, if you're even a little bit dehydrated, that can be the difference right there. You got to stay hydrated. Are sports drinks okay? Yeah, they're fine in moderation. If you're pounding a whole bunch of Gatorades, that's a lot of sugar in the system. So maybe a Gatorade Zero or whatever the sugar-free version is, or maybe cut it half and half, right? Like do half a water, half a Gatorade type deal. So you're not just drinking all that sugar. And you also need to be careful not to overhydrate. That's a thing too. If you're drinking so much water that it's just flushing every single nutrient out of your system, that's probably a problem as well. So you don't want to just be drinking massive amounts of water nonstop. You maybe have seen this before. This is the urine hydration chart. And the easiest way to know if you are properly hydrated is to look at the color of the urine, compare it to this chart right here. If you're in the 1, 2, or 3 range, the green quadrant, then you are properly hydrated. If you are 4 and below, you are not properly hydrated. If you are 8, then I am concerned about your health. And we will pretty much leave it at that. Bonus visualization exercise. I want to leave some time for the Q&A. So I'll just say this, instead of walking you through it, I'll just say this. I encourage swimmers to practice seeing their success before they actually go and perform it. So the easiest way, have them sit or lay down with their eyes closed, do some deep breathing to slow their heart rate down, and then boom, use their imagination. The test one I always do with the super pups is I'll have them walk through a 50 freestyle and I'll narrate it for them the first time so they learn how. And just to give you a super quick example, what I'll do is be like, I'll tell them, okay, imagine in your brain you're swimming a 50 free and try to use all 5 senses when you do this 50 free. Okay, close your eyes, ready, go. And then I'll start narrating it for them and I'm like, all right, you hear the crowd up in the stands murmuring as you get ready to get on the block. You feel the cold air in the Ramsey Center sweep by you. Now you step your foot onto that step and you feel your foot hit the step of the block. Then you hear the whistles from the official, which are loud and piercing, and that tells you it's time to step up on the block. Then you hear the long whistle, which means get ready. And then you hear take your mark and you reach down and you grab the block and you feel the grip tape on the block with your thumbs. And you can smell the chlorine from the water wafting up into your nose. And then you hear burp and you dive in and splash and you feel the water hit your skin and it's cold and it wakes you up. And now you're in a tight streamline and you begin your really big, powerful dolphin kicks and you sneak a peek over in the lane next to you and see the person right by you. So I will literally walk them through a whole 50 freestyle just like that. And they can try to do that on their own. You as parents can help walk them through that visualization process as well. But that's huge. If you can visualize success, and I don't want to skip through the end of the visualizing. the end is key. Make them visualize, or swimmers visualize touching the wall, feel your hands hit the touch pad, see yourself, look up at the scoreboard, see that time that you wanted to hit on the scoreboard in your imagination, and do a little splash the water celebration in your imagination because you got the time you wanted, right? That is so valuable right there. So I would highly recommend doing the visualization stuff. All right. I'm going to leave this disclaimer in there about what to do if my swimmer doesn't make state. I'll send this PowerPoint out to you guys, but I'll sum it up by saying not every kid makes state, and not everyone who makes it sometimes makes it every year. And at ABSC, we're cool with that. We take the long-term view and we treat every swimmer the same. Harvey always says, our head coach Harvey always says, I want swimmers to have the same experience with ABSC, whether they are a brand new swimmer who's never raced before or whether they're an Olympic champion. And Harvey, who's actually coached Olympic champions, that has some clout when he says that. So let's jump. We got about 4.5 minutes here to jump into some Q&A. Sorry, I had to breeze through the end there. And I'm going to stop my screen share here and see if I can take a few questions. So if you guys have any questions at all at this time, let's go ahead and post those in the chat. Or I guess you could unmute and let me at it real quick. But also, if you're while you got a minute here in the chat, if you want to give me some affirmation that I didn't say anything terribly wrong when it comes to nutrition, I'd really appreciate that, because I'm, like I said, a little nervous when it comes to being a nutrition expert. So yeah, I really appreciate y'all's time. I'll give everybody a second here to type or ask questions. In the meantime, I'll just say what typically worked for me on the nutrition and hydration side as a swimmer is I always brought my same water bottle to every swim meet, and I always had my pre-packed snacks. And so having those, just planning it out in advance and just having a plan and following that plan, that already goes a really, really long way. So good question. How do we calculate a calorie goal for our athlete? So good question. I'll have to look that up before I give you a great answer. But one thing that I'll say is just keep in mind that your athletes are burning a lot more calories than the average human on days that they swim practice or swim a meet. So if the average, person is eating like 2,500 calories or 2,000 calories or whatever, somewhere in that range in a day, your swimmer needs to definitely up that a little bit, as long as it's not unhealthy stuff. Swimmers have a reputation of eating a lot, and that's totally fine as long as they're not completely filling their stomach. That's probably a good thing, but I'll look up a good calorie goal estimate there and see if I can get back to you on that. Here's another one. Since none of the regular season meets are prelim final, what recommendations do you have for preparing mentally and physically for those long days? Also, does ABSC recommend holding back during prelims? Oh man, those are both really good questions. So I'll answer the second one first. Typically, no, we do not recommend holding back during prelims. We don't want to waste an opportunity to go a best time. And I've seen it enough times where people mess around, that whole mess around and find out. I've seen people mess around and find out the wrong way. They hold back in prelims, and then all of a sudden they're not swimming finals anymore, right? And then all they have to show for that day is a 5-second ad, and they don't get a chance to redeem it at finals. So typically, we don't recommend holding back. I mean, I know there are some instances where swimmers are just way ahead of the field, and so maybe they do, but that's something they should probably talk with individually with the coach. In general, not typically a good practice. I coach my super pups that I want them to try to take advantage of every swim. And I've had, the Zoe Zellners of the world last year who were top seed by several seconds at state. And I didn't tell her to hold back just because I didn't want her to waste an opportunity. And then the other one was, since we don't do a lot of prelim finals, how do we prepare mentally and physically? Great question. So over time, doing the prelim final meets helps at divisionals and state and all that kind of stuff. You kind of learn as you go. But really, we're going to coach them up to treat it as one big meet and try to, like I said, take advantage of every single swim. The only thing that you're going to want to do differently is make sure that you are staying on low power mode in between prelims and finals. So like I said, kids should take a nap. They should hydrate really well. They should just rest. That's the big thing, is just learning how to go hard at prelims, take care of your cool down, go home and rest and relax mentally, and then come back at finals, warm up again, do the full warm up, and then get excited about racing with your friends. make finals fun, make prelims business, make finals fun. We talk about that a lot. Make prelims business, make finals fun. So hopefully that helps. Probably got about 30 seconds if anybody wants to throw a Hail Mary in there. All those were great questions though. All right, well, just in case we run out here, just want to say thank you to all you guys for joining. I'll make sure to get this recording sent out and the PowerPoint with the links and all sent out. And I hope that was helpful. So thank you all. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me. Maybe I can give you a more thoughtful response as well. So definitely feel free to reach out if you've got questions.